Good afternoon. Welcome to the Warrior Soul podcast. This is Chris Albert, and I'm your host. In the veteran community, we've gone through a lot over the last decade. A lot of veterans have faced things like PTS, like TBI, depression. And we hear on the news consistently about veterans who are experiencing a lot of the negative aspects of life after military service. And then, there's a lot of us out there who are really trying to push forward and who are really trying to make the most out of our civilian lives. And we're trying to get beyond the stigma of somebody who's suffering from these issues, somebody who's dealing with the depression, who's dealing with missing his brothers in arms, who's dealing with life changes, and who's dealing with trying to grow. And the thing is, people keep talking about this thing called being normal. And you have to ask yourself, do you want to be normal in the first place? I don't think that any of us wanted to be normal when we served. We wanted to be extraordinary. We wanted to put our lives on the line for our country. We wanted to serve our country in the best way possible, and we wanted to be better people for it. So the question in my mind is, why would we ever seek to be normal after military service? Why would we ever seek to just meet the status quo when so many of us could get so much more? I've got Andrew Marr with me from the Warrior Angels Foundation. Andrew is a special forces operator. And when he left military service, he experienced a lot of these types of issues that caused him to really want to seek just feeling good in the first place. But through his research and through his work, he's come across some amazing things that have not only allowed him to get back to his elite performance level, but that have also allowed him to find things that he can be passionate about, to move his life forward, to make it better, to experience growth. And the best part about Andrew is that he's trying to give this gift to others. He's trying to help his brothers and sisters in arms to try to achieve what he's been able to achieve. And so, Andrew, I want to welcome you here to the Warrior Soul podcast, and I want to thank you for coming on. For those of you who don't know, we actually recorded this episode once before, and I screwed up the audio on it, and so I'm going to own that. And Andrew is such a great guy. He's putting in his time to come on here to talk to all of us about the great work that they're doing over there at the Warrior Angels Foundation. And Andrew, I really want to thank you for that.
Chris, thanks for having us on, brother. And it's my absolute honor. And when I heard that the last episode that we recorded didn't get fully recovered, it was a no-brainer. The information's too important to not put out, man. So I just hey, great, this is another opportunity for us to get it right, so we can pass this message on to the listeners.
Absolutely. So Andrew, you served in special forces. You were an operator. Tell us a little bit about your background. Tell us a little bit about where you're coming from and what led you to serve in the first place and what your experience was like.
I think a lot of it has to do with just kind of how I grew up. And it's kind of almost cliche you hear about it, but I grew up in Texas, and everybody wanted to be tough You know what I mean? I don't know if we were tough, but you definitely wanted to have the persona of tough. And growing up in Texas, you know, what was important where I was from was athletics, sports. And so from the youngest age, I was always an athlete. And I think you learn that sense of teamwork and camaraderie and, you know, getting out of your comfort level and being able to be criticized to improve. You know what I mean? And I think those set the groundwork, the framework for somebody to be successful later on in life. And I look back to some of those role models that I had, you know, first and foremost, my father and coaches and stuff like that. And I think that has a lot to do with being kind of being resourceful and resilient later on in life, learning those lessons early on. And I think, you know, that probably had a lot to do with it. One of four boys growing up. We were all close in age, 2 years apart. And so, you know, we just grew up fighting. We didn't know anything else. But that to us was our normal. And it wasn't anything malicious, just boys growing up. And so I think growing up like that, always in athletics, always in boys, you know, being in Texas when it was still, it wasn't taboo to be, you know, a tough persona or something like that. You know, that was more of what people were striving for, you know, is responsible for it. And then fast forward post 9/11, or 9/11 happens. I'm in college. I'm playing college football. And that's all I wanted to do is I wanted to be a college athlete and I wanted to play professionally. But I always thought, you know, there's guys out laying their life on the line tonight for the country, for freedom, you know, and I'm kind of pursuing my own ambitions. You know, it wasn't an unethical or immoral thing on my part. It was just like, you know, if this ends, this personal mission of mine ends, I think that's probably a good natural segue into it. So when I graduated college and there was no professional career there, it didn't take long. I enlisted 3 months after I graduated college, you know, to go specifically for special forces. And that's kind of the road that led in there.
Talk to us a little bit about your enlistment. So you enlisted as a basic infantryman, 11 Bravo, right?
Right.
And then from there, you went into special forces training. What was the training like? You know, how long was it? What was the selection like and things like that?
So they have what's called an 18 X-ray contract. And what that allows is to a person that has certain credentials to come in and to go right into Green Beret training pipeline. And so that's what I wanted. I didn't want any lag time in between that. But because of past injuries, this, that, and the other, they wouldn't give me that contract. So they gave me 11 Bravo. So I said, great, I'll take it. And then at basic training, I performed well there and was offered a opportunity to try out, essentially, for an 18 X-ray contract, earn that. So what that does is after you finish your basic training and your what they call OSIT, one station unit training, the advanced skills after that, you go into airborne school, learn how to jump, and then you go right to Fort Bragg, North Carolina, and they put you into a preparatory course to get ready for what they call Special Forces Assessment and Selection. That's our way of figuring out who is a good candidate to become a Special Forces operator. And so you go to SFAS. It was 24 days back when I went through it in 2007. Got selected, and from that point on, it's usually about somewhere between 18 months to 2.5 years to get through the entire course, based on what specialty, what job specialty you had. So I was an engineer, which basically had me working with demolitions and explosives, and so my pipeline wasn't as long as, say, a medics, where medics would have been 2.5 years. Mine was right around 2 years it took to get a Green Beret. But 6 phases of training there, including language. And then when you graduate the Q course, you go to your operational team, what we call ODA, Operational Detachment Alpha. And I went up to first group in Washington State and up in 2009. And I was on the same team up there until my medical retirement last year.
Wow. And you speak Korean, right? Fluent
Yeah. It was, well, I graded out as proficient in Korean in 2009. I'll put it that way. Yeah, but you learn how to take tests, man. So I scored well enough to get paid in Tagalog, which is Filipino, and then Thai, Yeah, Thai, Tagalog, Indo, and then Korean as well.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, but I mean, basically just stuff to be conversational. But that was about it. And that's a learned skill that I have not kept up with.
Yeah, I imagine you really have to be in the country. You have to be immersed in it in order to
Yeah.
keep going with it and everything.
And I'm sure anybody listening right now, when they were downrange or whatever, they picked up on some local words to be just basic conversational stuff. So same type of thing there.
Mm-hmm. And before we move on to the to the rest of the story here, because I know that there's probably a lot of people out there. We've got a lot of young people out there who might be interested in a career in the Army or a career in Special Forces. What would you say to them as far as trying out for Special Forces? What types of advice would you give to them?
Well, you know what? They've done a lot of research trying to figure out, hey, like, is there a body type? Is there a certain height or a certain 2-mile time that makes for a good operator? And what they've basically come up with is take all the physical attributes that you think that you need to be successful and throw them out the window. The most important thing to the operator, any any serviceman on the battlefield, is their mind. So what you're able to do in Special Forces, what you're given, what you've earned the right to do is kind of make decisions autonomously, right? You've been given the leeway, you've earned the right to make decisions. So I would say get comfortable dealing in environments that are ambiguous, and get comfortable with being resourceful without resources, and being a team player at all times, understanding what the end state is, what the mission is, and being able to work and take a team to be able to do that. And oftentimes think about you're going to be leading a small team of indigenous forces that does not speak your language. And so you have to be a very good educator. You have to be a very good communicator in addition to your trigger pulling responsibilities.
Absolutely. That's great advice. And that leads us into the next aspect of the story when it comes to the human mind and its importance for our health and our happiness and our performance. So tell us about that. Tell us about, your experience on deployment and what happened and why, what led you to what you're doing now.
Yeah, my experience on deployments, it was probably not too different than any other soft guys' experiences at multiple deployments. You don't win them all, but you win most. And the beautiful thing about combat is it doesn't. You don't find out necessarily who you are. You probably know that as a soft guy, but it's going to reveal the character of everybody else around you, and your character is going to be revealed to everybody else that was around you. I think probably my key takeaway that I'll talk about from my deployments is what I'm most grateful for is, you hear about the best generation in World War II, and I don't dispute that whatsoever. I think we have a smaller sect of the generation that is alive today that is absolutely exceeds that standard. And here's why. When you get these high-performing individuals who realize that they had talents that probably could have been used anywhere, on the most talented end, on the physical spectrum, the most talented end on the intellectual spectrum, and somebody that didn't come from necessarily, with a silver spoon in their mouth, but they made the decision after 9/11 to say, you know what, there is shit going on in the world, and I think I can make a difference. I can make a change about it. And I'm going to offer up my talents and my services to be able to do that. So what that afforded me the opportunity to do was to be around the most incredible men in the most difficult circumstances known to man, and to see how that human spirit endures. And so that, Chris, was an absolutely beautiful thing that I got to see in day out. How does somebody respond when their buddy dies next to them and the job's got to go on and everybody else is counting on them, and they're dealing with all their stuff they're dealing with from that and whatever it is they're dealing with at home. But they've said, you know what, it doesn't matter. We're going we're here, so we're going to do the best that we can to impact this the best way that we know how. That type of mindset, that type of person, man, you don't find that every day. So to be able to live that my entire time on the teams, that, you know, that was the operator experience, just being around men that challenged me to raise my game every day. So that was what was incredible.
Right. Dude, that's so incredible that you say that, because not only is that something that, I mean, we think about combat a lot of times, and combat can be a metaphor for life.
Right. Absolutely.
Right? And you know, so many people out there think of the world as imposing this hard situation just on them.
Right.
But the reality is that the world makes things hard for everybody. And it's not what happens to you or what gets thrown at you. It's how you respond to it, and how you react to it and your feeling about that situation. And I think in a lot of ways, what we all have to learn as a generation, and in this generation, is to take that example, and to really think about how we want to react in the moment, and in the time period where it's time for us to make a decision and it's time for us to take an action. You know, I think that looking at you and knowing a bit about your story, you know, I see that in you, not only in your combat experience, but in what you've done since then, and how you've carried on and gotten past some of the difficulties that you had when you got home. You know, I think that's a beautiful thing. And despite all the difficulties, you're a better person for it now.
Right. Yeah, I agree.
So you go through your deployments and you come home, and you've just been through what is probably one of the hardest and most trying experiences of your life. And now you're back in the United States, and you are trying probably to make sense of it all. You're probably trying to normalize back into your job back here. What was going on? What happened to you then?
Well, to caveat on your last point, man, I agree with 100%. And this will tie in. And what you're saying is basically like, hey, we can't control the circumstances of life, but we can control our attitude, and we can control our effort and how we choose to think, accept, and react to certain stimuli in life, you know? So indirectly, we can shape the circumstances of our life. That was kind of my, that was my mindset forever, and it still is. And so even being that positive, having that positive outlook on life, when I got back after my last trip, I was hit with some things that I lost some perspective. And what happened was basically 4 or 5 months after my last trip, we started having all these new symptoms that was never present before. And it started with extreme loss of libido and energy, into migraine headaches, which went to blurry vision, into double vision, and balance issues. And then I started having behavioral problems, difficulties with anxiety, depression, rage, crying for no reason, crying in public, you know, dealing with children and people, like what I knew was to be the wrong way to deal with something in a situation, but not being able to do otherwise. You know what I mean? And that was a very scary feeling. So again, high performer, athlete, SF guy, never had an issue, to 6 months, you know, after my last trip, man, I'm so fucked up. You know, now I'm on 13 different medications. You know, I said it before, I was alcoholic. My wife was 9 months pregnant, and I was so far gone. She actually had to ask me to please keep my drinking down for the day in case she went into labor, so she didn't have to drive herself to the hospital. You know, and I was actually like, hey, how dare you ask me a question like that? I've been to every driving school in the country. I can drink and drive with blindfolded with one arm, which was absolutely not the right answer. But that's where my mindset was. You know what I mean? Not to take a step back and say, no, that's probably a good idea. You know, my wife doesn't want me to do this because she doesn't want to be in labor and drive herself to the hospital. But my reaction was, not one that I'd want to repeat on air, and so that's where I was at, and just having a lot of physical problems. I had blood clots and near-death experiences with that. We had problems with my children were sick. It was a very rough time, and looking for a way out. And all I found was a number of medications that, at the end of the day, I think only exacerbated problems and made it worse, because it didn't go to find the underlying condition. It was just treating my complaints, which, I'm thankful somebody was there to listen to what my complaints were. But if you don't ask the right questions, you don't get the right answers. And so if you're just trying to cover up whatever is bleeding at the moment, you're not going to fix the underlying condition. And because of that, that's why we went down had the travels and the trials and tribulations that we had. But you have to go through those, Chris, to come out on the other side and gain some perspective. But that was the downward spiral that led me to thinking, I think it might be better just to end my life, because it might be easier on my parents, on my kids, on my wife, if I'm not around anymore.
Yeah, I've had my own issues with substance abuse, and I think my issues with substance abuse were mostly related to my own lack of intelligence about the matter at the time, because I started getting into it mainly because I thought that there was so much monotony in life. After you serve in the military, you go through these amazing experiences, and I say amazing because they are amazing. Right. You're young. You are around people you love and people you work well with. You look great in uniform. You train, and you're learning so many amazing things. You get to travel around, and I remember the hurry up and wait. I remember getting slapped in the face with the big green weenie, but it was at the same time, it was really one of the greatest times of my life. And when I came back, it was like, I think I had some depression about it, some separation issues and things like that. But you don't want to think about that. You want to think about, okay, I'm going to get on with my life right now. And so, when I was drinking and I was really pushing the alcohol, I really wasn't realizing that I was probably self-medicating for some of, the issues that were scarring me. And I didn't give myself time to have a good transition. I didn't give myself time to really think about my experiences. And I really didn't think about what I wanted the rest of my life to be like. And so to fill the monotony, drinking, womanizing, drugs, things like that, they filled my time. And it sounds like, in a lot of ways, you're trying to make sense of everything and at the same time trying to cover up some pain there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for me with the TBI, I was always a social drinker, but never anything that warranted a red flag. And when I started having these panic attacks, it was so foreign, and I thought this was the emotionally weak person's problem. I first of all, I had no idea what was going on, but they got so bad that the only way I could function, I thought, was to drink. You know what I mean? So I was like, I don't know how else to deal with this. I think I'm going crazy. I can't get good answers from the medical system. And I know when I start drinking, at least I can kill whatever this panic and undue depression that's come on me, at least quell it in some capacity. And then you start doing that, and then that becomes your new normal, if you will. And, that's what I needed to get out of bed in the morning, as I started drinking. And it wasn't because, I just having party and having a great time. That's what I did to get by with the physical pain and the emotional, behavioral, neuropsychological difficulties. But I think getting out, that your experience is very common, man. And I think, what we all strive for is to be around like-minded individuals, that challenge us. And to have a purpose. And I think for the most part, you do get that in the military. And depending where you're at, you're going to have some very like-minded people that are challenging you to be better every day. And I think if you get out of the military and you're unprepared for that, or you're unprepared of what those strengths meant to your life, it's very easy to lose perspective. And perspective is what I mean is like what you learn from your past experiences in tough times in the military. And if you lost friends or things went wrong, think about, I would say my challenge to others would be, think about what that person would want you to be doing now if they were alive. Would they want you to be sitting around here complaining, sitting on a couch for 3 weeks, drinking, or would they want you to be out living it to the fullest and helping others? And the answer every time I ask that question is, you're right. I never thought about it that way. They wouldn't want me sitting around there talking about what once was. They would want me to go out there and be mastering my life. I think that's the key success to a successful transition, man. Realize what made it great. Realize that you can transfer those foundational principles on anything you do in life, and reach back and think about your perspectives and be grateful for them. A lot of those lessons were paid in blood, and oftentimes somebody else's blood. We have a obligation to go and to pay it forward and to do the right thing every day for those people who did sacrifice and didn't make it back, maybe alive or wholly or functionally or however, you know what I mean?
Absolutely. Absolutely. For you, what was the thing that told you, okay, I need to be doing something different? I can't be taking this 13, 14 medications I'm getting from the VA. Yeah. I need to figure out a way to make this better. What was that thing that made you do that?
Well, after, so it all happened at the same time. My son, our youngest son, had what's called a lymphatic malformation in his neck. So it blew about to the size of a softball. He had a growth in there. And my wife was 9 months pregnant, like I said earlier. So we took him into the emergency room. My calf had been killing me for about 3 days. So it turns out my boy Jace had to go into emergency surgery to take this growth out of his neck that was affecting his breathing. Becky went into labor, and then it turned out that's when I had the blood clot. So we were all there in the ER in the same room.
Oh my God.
With blood clots, Jace with his neck popping out, Becky going into labor. So I denied any treatment on myself until Jace and Becky were good. So I was going back and forth between the 4th floor where Jace was having surgery and the 2nd floor where Becky was giving birth to our youngest boy. And I'm drinking and I'm popping our narcotics and opiates in between, not to have a party or be high, just to function. And so boy gets born, safe, totally good. Jace finishes up his surgery. He's fine. They finally get me into imaging to take an x-ray of my leg, and they found out, hey, there's a massive blood clot, deep vein thrombosis in your left leg. Because I didn't get attention at the right times, it had broken off and went into both lungs. And so now we were fighting against the clock to survive. And so with my boy in the recovery room, Becky still in the delivery room, now I'm being rushed into the ER to deal with the blood clots. And we got those taken care of. I was in the hospital for about 2 weeks with that. But I was really unhappy with the level of care and the level of explanation about what caused it, what led up to the blood clots, and how life would be after post blood clots. And this is at the time where I had been through every mechanism in the Department of Defense for specialty traumatic brain injury treatments, right? So I'd been to Walter Reed for a month, and they're inpatient there for TBI. I've been on every other TBI program that you can been on. And so my understanding of that care was lacking. I was really fed up with the care I had got when I was, in dire needs. I was unhappy with the care that my family had gotten. And I realized, like, hey man, nobody's going to do this for me. You know what I mean? Nobody else should. This is my job, and I'm going to quit complaining about my circumstance. I'm going to quit crying that, I was told, I couldn't operate anymore. Basically, hey, you can't take another blow to the head. We don't know what it'll do to you. And so that, coupled with all the difficulties I was having, I got in this, why did my life turn out like this? And somebody that was really negative and the opposite of positive. And it was at that point there at the hospital, again, I was like, enough is enough. I'm going to be my own best advocate. I'm going to do my own research. I'm going to figure out a way to get off this medication. That was my number one goal at the time. I just want to get off the medication. I know I can't operate anymore. I know I can't be in the Army anymore. I just want to be able to function and be the man that I want to be for my wife, for my kids, and continuing to be in some kind of leadership capacity. In order to be able to do that, I've got to get better. I've got to get off these medications. I've got to quit drinking, and I've got to change my mindset out of this. The world is against me into, like I said, I can't guarantee an outcome, but I can guarantee you my attitude and my effort. And I'm going to make sure, damn sure, that those are the best output that I can put out every day. Every day we're going to improve. If it's just a millimeter, we'll stack them up and look at them 2 weeks later and say, okay, great, we're making progress. And that was the mindset that kind of turned it around for me.
And how old were you when this deep vein thrombosis occurred? And
32.
You were 32 at the time. Wow. That's a young man experiencing a near-death experience from a blood clot formed in his leg.
It's a very low it's a high mortality rate from my understanding. And I was still in great shape at the time. And they said, hey, one of the reasons that we think you survived is because you're in great cardiovascular condition.
So you were doing you were still running in PT and the whole time.
Yeah, that's a great thing about an operator is a fully functional alcoholic and training never suffered.
Yeah. When I was in the Marine Corps, I used to smoke a pack and a half of cigarettes a day, and I run like a deer. It was the craziest thing in the world. And I remember you'd see people at the finish line, as soon as they're done with their PT test, they light up a cigarette. And it's ridiculous.
Oh, man. Just a whole different culture, man. But you know what? There's some mental acuity and some mental strength there saying, you know what? I'm going to overcome this and fucking smoke and run anyway. I don't know.
Yep.
I don't recommend it. I don't applaud it, but there's something to be said about somebody who can do that.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was one of the things I think that led me to do it. I was like, I want to be hard. I want to be the kind of guy who can smoke a cigarette while running.
Yep. That son of a bitch runs a sub 12 2-minute mile and smokes a pack a day.
Yeah, exactly. But don't smoke, people. Don't smoke at all.
Absolutely do not. Horrible.
And if you're going into the military, the biggest thing I recommend to you is there's going to be people with tins of Copenhagen. There's going to be people with cigarettes, and they're going to look really happy doing it. But if you want to save yourself a lot of trouble down the line, don't do it. Don't do it.
No, yeah. What we're it's starting to happen with upper echelons and special operations, but I hope it trickles on down is that like, hey, you have to treat yourself as an athlete. You know what I mean? Not some weekend warrior. So man, like the whole culture is changing as far as dynamic stretching, recovery, nutrition, hydration, all these things that, the extreme sports are on the cutting edge. It's making its way over, to the operator fields, and I hope it trickles on down. But yeah, I mean, if you're thinking about getting in, you need to be thinking like, hey, how do I perform like an athlete, a professional athlete? Because you're basically being paid to perform.
Right, exactly. I also wouldn't recommend banning it because I think that would put morale through the floor.
Oh, yeah.
So we're in this story right now. You've come to your moment where you need to figure out what you're going to do and how you're going to change the situation.
Yeah.
And so you go and you start to hit the books.
Yeah.
And you start to try to figure out some things about what's going on in your body. And what did you find?
Yeah, so after I got back from the blood clots, I essentially locked myself upstairs for 2 weeks, man, and I tried to figure it out. And so I knew what all the things were wrong with me. I knew my lab reports were bad or this, that, the other. So I just started there and started looking at the scientific literature and started understanding about the neuroendocrine system, hormones, inflammation, and some literature that was already out about, hey, what happens to a brain that's in close proximity to a lot of blast waves. And so I started reading this stuff, and I was just baffled because I was getting the scientific literature was very black and white, and then what I was getting from the medical system was very gray at best. And so that's when he said, you know what, again, I'll take matters into my own hands. I'm going to find out what else is out there, and I'm going to do it. And so I found several things. I found a functional neurology brain institute down in Texas that we went to that we had some success with. I looked at a place called the Brain Treatment Foundation that works with doing an EEG of your brain and then syncing up your different brain waves. So you have alpha, theta, data waves, and they need to be in sequence for the brain to fully be optimal, and figuring those things out. And then figuring out what else is out there, hyperbaric oxygen treatment. And people have all these things, remedies that they say are working. So I wanted to get down to, hey, why does some things work for some people and they don't work for others? What is the brass tacks? Is there an underlying condition? Is there a place where it starts? And if there is, can we identify it and can we treat it? And so being on that road, getting out there, trying different things, learning from different people, that led me to Dr. Marr, top neuroendocrinologist out of California. He's been dealing with TBI specifically, diagnosing and treating TBI specifically since 2004. And he's developed these revolutionary protocols that can effectively improve people's quality of life that's been diagnosed or not diagnosed, but that's had head injuries. And so that was, he emailed me and he left me some information. Hey, here's my credentials. He left me a Joe Rogan podcast he did. He's like, listen to this podcast. If you have time, if any of this is of value or interest to you, let me know and let's get you on the program. And I listened to the podcast he did with Joe Rogan and another one of his patients called Matt Gosney, a Navy corpsman who had a couple of, his last trip was a bad trip, got hit and took 3 times and shrapnel on the face and just was having a rough time. Was on 16 or 17 medications and had come to Dr. Gordon and got treated effectively. And right now the foundation covers all Matt Gosney's costs. And I can tell you he's off 17 medications and he's living in Hollywood as a screenwriter, doing phenomenal.
Wow.
This is a guy who has multiple attempts at suicide. You know what I mean? And couldn't function. So now he's off all medication, functioning at a high level, as a screenwriter. So, but anyways, I was listening to him talk and tell his story, Chris, and everything he was saying was like, I was like, that's my story. I was like, man, okay, so maybe this just isn't special to me. It was the first time I thought that, like, maybe this isn't just specific to me. This is a much bigger problem. And I started to understand that it was, and I think that also helped the first time I realized, like, hey, this is not just my problem. This is a big problem. And even if nobody's talking about it where I'm at, it's happening. And so I need to talk about it. But heard that podcast. It was a no-brainer. Hey, I got to do this. Contacted Dr. Gordon. We linked up there in Southern California and ran the tests, started the protocol, and the rest is history. 18 months, almost 18 months later, I'm off 13 medications, sober, and living, functioning at a high capacity, as good, if not better than my pre-injury status. But if Dr. Gordon wouldn't have, for no benefit to himself, just because it was the right thing to do, reached out to me and said, hey, I have something that we think can help you, try it out. We wouldn't be where we're at today. We wouldn't have the foundation where it's at. We wouldn't have helped over 120 other veterans to do the same thing that happened with me and happened with Matt. And so it all goes back to Dr. Gordon just being selfless and living by a code, and that's code is doing the right thing.
Absolutely. I just want to clarify for everybody at home, some of the things that Andrew was going through, it wasn't just alcoholism or depression. You were having problems balancing, right? You were having problems walking around. You were having problems with coordination, falling around and things like that, right?
Yeah. So balance was a real issue, going from laying down to standing or sitting to standing, or getting out of a vehicle. Be stationary and the vertigo would set in. But yeah, it was a very low quality of life there for about 18 months to 2 years.
Wow. And then right now you're actually competing in could you hit your volume just a little bit down? Sorry about that.
No problem.
There we go. Right now you're actually competing in shot put, right?
Yeah, so I competed in shot put and discus at what they call the Warrior Games. So the Department of Defense puts on for wounded service members and veterans every year, started in 2010. And so we competed in that at West Point. That happened last June out at West Point. And yeah, so I wanted to do those because both of them, I do a rotational spin, a rotational throw with the shot put and discus. And again, we just wanted to show like, hey, 2 years ago, I had a difficulty walking down the hall. You know what I mean? And there's no way I could have performed or competed doing a spin, a throw rotation, sequence at any level. And now doing it at a high level. So I was a finalist in discus, and I got third place in shot put. And so again, it wasn't anything that we're trying to highlight, personally what we're doing, but just saying, hey, you can be rocked by the circumstances of life and think that you can't function anymore, or you're not going to be able to compete anymore, but you can. You just have to make your mind up that you're going to do it regardless of what the experts say or anybody else says about your life.
Absolutely. And through your research, when you were looking at what constitutes a traumatic brain injury and what constitutes a TBI, a lot of times it's not just being blown up by an IED directly or being directly exposed to something. You found some other ways for that brain inflammation from a TBI could occur. And can you tell us about that?
So the mechanism of injury almost it can be so varied, right? There's a lot of variables. So there is blunt force trauma, explosive blast wave, acceleration, deacceleration, but things that we never thought about as soldiers, Marines, and the science is revealing now that we might need to think differently about doing it is the effects of being around thousands of rounds going off. Day in and day out for years, the effects of multiple Carl Gustav rounds, in close proximity and stuff like that. So there's other environmental stressors and environmental factors that can produce the same alteration in brain function. So it's just varied. But the important factor is the main thing about TBI is it's a two-phase injury. Again, phase one is that initial trauma, whatever it is, be it blunt force trauma, falling off of a roof, or acceleration, deceleration, like we talked about. Phase two is the silent part that we hear, called the post-traumatic inflammation, neuroinflammation. And that can happen a week, a month, years after the injury. So that's when somebody starts having these new problems and they go to the doctor and say, hey, these are the symptoms I'm having. The doctors on a whole aren't doing their due diligence to ask the right questions to say, okay, well, what is the reasons, what precipitated these symptoms? And can we find a actual point in time on your timeline where there was trauma that we know happened? Instead, we just treat symptoms. And doing that, you don't get to the problem. If you don't do that, then you're just stringing out people on a life that's, predicated on a bowl of mind-altering pills.
Absolutely. And so, watched you actually went on Joe Rogan after starting to work with Dr. Gordon. So, and you talked a little bit about your story. But there's guys out there who might have just been in proximity to explosions, might have just been through some sort of continuous proximity to blasts. And in that process, the brain racks back and forth inside the skull and can cause a lot of different types of inflammation and things like that we're talking about. And that inflammation can really lead to a lot of these types of issues where, your brain is also a hormonal producing center. And if, it can also really harm your testosterone production and lack of testosterone production, lack of hormone production. We forget how much hormones play a role in our well-being and how much they play a role in how we function. And if your hormonal processes get interrupted, then in many cases, it's like a domino or a cascade effect where it can interrupt a lot of the other processes in your body. So that's
yeah, you're dead on, Chris. And so you don't have to be knocked out or unconscious or to have an open head fracture to suffer a traumatic brain injury. And so any number of things can cause that, being in close proximity to a blast wave. And again, it's not like, hey, if you just hit your head one time, you're at great risk. Probably not. But probably not even, being around one or minimal explosions or minimal door breaches. But when you do that repetitively, day in and day out over a period of years, we now know that is having a damning effect on the brain. It's causing this micro scarring that is not visible on imaging yet, right? So we can't see it on imaging. We can see it post-mortem, and then we can make a correlation off a lab analysis that points out the neuroinflammation markers that are in the brain, as well as, hey, what about the hormones that are produced in the brain called neurosteroids? Are they affected? And so if we have neuroinflammation, we have inflammation, and you have a dysregulation of your hormones, man, that's a recipe for disaster. Everything that these neurosteroids are tied to, cognition, executive decision-making, being able to do the right things socially, make the right decisions, affects our physiology, our psychology, everything about us. When that starts to become deficient or insufficient, man, that's when we start to see all these problems that we were outlining earlier. And here's another important thing is, so say the normal range for total testosterone is somewhere between 1 and 10, right? And you come in as a healthy 35-year-old at a 2. Well, the doctor's going to say you're totally normal, you're within range, even though you're saying you have all these symptoms, you're fine. And we're saying, not only is that wrong, that is unethical, because a 33 or 35-year-old's numbers should not be that low. And if they're saying that they're having all these problems and we can't associate anything else to these problems, then can we try to do a physiological correct dose of what this person is deficient in to see if that improves quality of life? And again, what our research has shown, when we do that, when we can correct the inflammation, when we can correct those deficiencies, quality life improves. And I'm talking, if you do as Dr. Gordon recommends, every time I've seen improvement, every time, over 120 cases.
Wow.
Yeah, and he's got 1,300 documented cases through the civil sector as well.
That's amazing. And it goes back to that, who's in the population for the normal levels. You probably have an average there of like 18-year-olds all the way up to like 90-year-old diabetics. And at 35 years old, you really shouldn't be feeling like a 90-year-old diabetic.
Right. So some biostatisticians in the 1970s came out with some interesting work, and they said the reference ranges that we use is really only applicable to the patients that we got those ranges from. So that group and that group alone, because of what you just said, because we're testing people in there from 18 to 95, people are probably not healthy subjects to begin with. So these references as canonical, scripture is not actually accurate. How that person's feeling, you know what I mean? So what might be 50 percentile of the recommended range for me might have me just feeling phenomenal, and you dragging, you got to be at 75th percentile. That's where we come in and say, this is what we're offering is precision based on your individual physiological needs. Nothing subjective about it. An objective analysis saying what's wrong, what's deficient, and then an objective way to treat it and then to measure it, and then do follow-up labs, take your subjective reports, triangulate them, find out where you are, and make improvements, take things away, add things to it. That's the process.
And this is why you don't want to go out and try to get some testosterone off the street and inject it in yourself. You need the supervision of a doctor. You need your blood work tested.
Yeah, that's a bad move for just a number of reasons. One, you have no idea where it came from. You have no idea there's a number of different testosterones out there and different ethers that are doing different things. So, you need to be under the attention of a professional and not just, some standard guy, a high level, individual. So getting it off the street is bad. For one, you don't know what it is. Two, what are you doing? Where are you starting? Where are you trying to get to? What are the reasons? If you're not managing that, if you're not tracking that, and you're doing it for all the wrong reasons. So don't be an amateur about it, man. If you're going to do it right, and let's get some real people behind you that know what they're doing.
Right, exactly, and that's why Andrew's here, is because he's putting people in touch with these resources and making sure that the people who need them get them. So since undergoing the treatment, you kind of experienced a renaissance. You're working on the foundation. The foundation is your greatest priority right now. You've also been doing some things in your life. Tell us about how much life has improved since going through this treatment, since partnering up with Dr. Gordon and experiencing this.
It's hard not to get emotional about it. I was, again, I just wanted to know, hey, can we please figure out what's wrong with me? Can I get an honest assessment so I can figure out what my new parameters are? And I'll live within the parameters, I'll operate in there. But I just want to find out what's going on. And, taking my girls to the movies, and then the next day coming home and seeing a preview and asking them if they wanted to go see the movie, and then having them look at me and in horror saying, "Dad, you just took us to that yesterday. How do you not remember that?" And just being completely unable to recall any of it. I thought life was over. I was 32. I was told, hey, you can no longer do what I felt was my purpose, was being an operator. Now I don't know. My purpose is taken away. I don't know what I'm going to do. My health is at risk. My family's health is at risk. Going from that in the physical pain, difficulty getting down the stairs in the morning and these mind-splitting headaches and double vision. You just, you got to the point where you thought maybe it's a better answer if I just don't remain, to now being on the other side of that. And I'm so thankful for everything we've been through, but being on the other side of that, realizing how special today is. And I didn't even need a reminder of how special today was. I'm fully aware of, my own mortality and everybody else's, but being able to get on the right side of health again, and then being able to help others to do the same thing. There's no more fulfilling thing in life, and my dad broke it down to me really well. And it was right in the middle of having that hard time. And he's, son, I don't know everything that you've been through, and I can't understand it anyway. But I do know if you find a way to make your life about putting value into somebody else, to helping somebody else, that will put value back in you. And, Chris, I found that to be the secret sauce, man. Make it about somebody else, figure out how to improve other people's well-being and life and quality of life. And as a byproduct, that is going to make your cup run over with just being full.
Absolutely. And I could not agree more with what you're saying. I mean, there's been times in my life where I was so focused on my own issues, my own problems, that I felt like I was in almost a cavern and I couldn't really see the light. And it really wasn't until I started doing things to add value to other people's lives, living a life of service, that I really began to see it again. Because I think a lot of us think when we go into the military and we get out, service is over, right? It's time for us to move on to something else. And what a lot of you out there, you have to understand is that service never ends, regardless of what you're doing. If you're in business, your job is to serve your customers. Your job is to serve people. If you are doing anything in this world, the only way you're going to see the higher purpose in what you're doing is if you're mindful of the idea that you're here to serve others and you're here to put value in other people's lives. And it's so beautiful that you were able to find that through your own life's trials and tribulations. And I think that that's absolutely amazing. I think that that's it's almost better that you found it that way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it makes it real. You know what I mean? And it's going back to perspectives, draw on your perspectives. And so go through and relive what you thought was a bad time. You know, it only is what we frame it to be. You know what I mean? It's not that way for the universe or the world. And so starting to look at it through that lens, help me to understand, I think, a bigger picture, and one that was, hey, don't run from your emotions when you experience them. Try to understand them. Try to feel what that's about, and where's that coming from? What's the true underlying theme or the central theme for this emotion? And if it's something that you can use to your advantage, then use it. And if you realize that it's something that's not optimal, then allow it to run its course and then go about your business. But you know, I thinking about it that way and realizing, hey, everybody has hopes, desires, and dreams, and their own fears allows me to try to treat people better as a whole.
Right, exactly. And don't run from your problems either.
Right.
Your problems through your negative experiences, through your quests to try to solve those problems, you could find something that could be changing your life. And
yeah, I agree, 100%.
Awesome.
It's all about the journey, man. It's all about the journey. We got to look back and figure out, you know, what insights were gained and how can I use that to better my performance in the future and help somebody else in a similar position.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So the Warrior Angels Foundation is up and going right now. How does somebody get treatment? How does somebody
so we try to make it as user-friendly process as possible. So if you're interested about any information on us, you can find it on our website, waftbi.org. That's waftbi.org. On there we have ways that you can donate, ways that you can do your own fundraiser in your community, ways to find out about all of the treatment aspects. But if you want treatment specifically, click on the treatment tab. It'll open up a page and just follow all information from that page. You'll say you're going to put in some information there, and then we're going to start some email exchanges, giving you everything that you need to fill out to get back to us. So once we get all your paperwork filled out, your health questionnaire, in addition to your DD-214 if you're a veteran, PCS orders if you're a service member, so we can verify service, we'll then look and make sure that you're a right candidate for this. And the right candidate is anybody who thinks that they've had suffered a traumatic brain injury in the line of duty. So it doesn't have to be necessarily combat, but it needs to be service related. So if you think you have those there, fill out the paperwork. We'll get it back to you. Once we have all the paperwork and you've been vetted, then it's a really easy process. Once we have the funding, we fund you. Our lab is in Florida, so we'll send our lab kit to wherever you're at. So say you're in Chicago, our lab kit will go from Jupiter, Florida to your home address in Chicago. We'll send a mobile phlebotomist out to your house to draw the blood. And they'll do that and then send it back to Florida. If you don't want to use a mobile phlebotomist, we'll make planning considerations for you to go to a lab that's close to your geographical location. And again, they'll mail it back to Florida. Florida will get the lab, they'll analyze it, get the results, send it to Dr. Florida. Send it to our doctor in California. He'll write up a detailed report. He'll then email that to you and also send in a FedEx document, which outlines everything that the lab analysis has found, and will then schedule a video conference between the two of you to do a one-on-one consultation. And at that time, one of our physicians will take you through everything in excruciating detail and make sure you understand what all that means. And more importantly, they'll give a recommended protocol. The protocol invoice will go to us after the consultation. We'll fund it, and then the protocols will be sent to your house there in Chicago in this example. So without having to go to a doctor's office, without having to wait in a waiting line or go to a VA, we've brought world-class traumatic brain injury care to the veteran wherever they're at. And then same process with our follow-up labs and anytime you need follow-up protocols. So we made pretty much an on-demand service.
And what direction are you guys going in? So are you guys looking to try to get this to become a new standard of care? Are you looking? Where are you trying to take this?
Yeah, so great question. We're not just in it to bang our chest and, hey, I'm a veteran, hear me roar. That actually disgusts me. What we wanted to do was bring about real impact and real change. So one, is there an objective way to identify the underlying condition? And then number two, can we treat the underlying condition? So having the answer, understanding the problem, going and finding the right answer, and then saying, okay, well, what's the right thing long-term? The right thing long-term is to have this implemented by the DOD and the VA. So this year, Dr. Gordon, along with some other high-profile physicians, will begin writing some articles on our last 100 patients, and to get published in the scientific literature next year, probably second quarter of 2017. And that will be some significant scientific findings. And then what we're doing right now is we're raising money for round 2, which will take about another 250 cases, and do another retrospective study on how those individuals are responding to their treatment. So we're going to put out 2 different groundbreaking articles in the next 3 years about the success that we've been able to replicate, and as vetted by independent review board and peer reviewed, articles. So at that point, it's no longer just me saying it and then us saying, hey, we have 1,300 documented cases. It's now actually having the scientific literature to support our findings. So at that point, we're ready to take this to Capitol Hill, which is the end state, to get this implemented by 2020 in DOD and the VA. So that's kind of our milestones right now. We're working to get these new articles published in the literature, and that'll keep us right on track to where we want to be for getting this implemented in 2020. When we do get it implemented, Chris, we can effectively stop this cascades of suicide and losing, high trained soldiers, Marines, and airmen to post-traumatic stress symptoms, to TBI symptoms, because we can stop them before they ever happen. Keep them in the force, strengthen the family, heal the veterans on the outside. And it's a fraction of the cost of what the government currently pays for TBI and PTS treatment. And again, it treats the underlying condition, which is not what the other platform is doing, which is basically medication and psychotherapy, which is not improving the condition. So everything we do is to bring about this lasting change. We have milestones along the way that we work towards, and everything we do is to meet with those objectives, to have this taken over, and then work ourselves out of a job.
So yeah, your effective goal is to not be an organization.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we're solving a very specific problem, and that is far-reaching outside of. It's not just a veteran issue or a service issue. It's a issue that deals with humanity. So, where our hypothesis is this can kind of lead the way for this to trickle down to the civil sector as a whole with these publications that are coming out in the next few years.
Absolutely. And do you have any idea the figures of how much money you'll be saving the federal government if this gets implemented?
Well, yeah, for 1-to-1. So the Congressional Budget Office put out a report in 2012 what the VA spends on TBI and PTS for one patient, and it's close to $15,000. And again, that's medication and psychotherapy. So those costs will only increase over that person's lifespan because those have consequences later on in life. where ours is about $5,000 in year one. Year two, it's going to be about $2,500 to $3,000, and then get you to a maintenance phase in year three, which is around $1,500. So a little more than $100 a month. So for a third of the cost, we can go and directly identify and treat the underlying condition in a fraction of the time. That's in the end is why it'll be taken over by the budget makers, because budget makers want to say they save money to the constituents, and we'll be able to say that.
Wow, that's mind blowing as far as how much money you'd be able to save. But also, and we talked about this the last time we talked. You have to think about that opportunity cost.
Yeah,
cost to the economy of not having these great elite performers out there doing work and
right.
out there being active participants and opening up businesses and becoming leaders and things like that.
I don't know what the loss of productivity is, but I know it's in the billions per year, like stupid billions, tens of billions, because I think it's 5.3 million Americans living with a disability towards TBI every year. So it's a big number, and you hit on it, man. When you bring somebody back to life, or when a veteran leaves the service and starts a business, these things have so many positive ripples just outside of that individual. So by turning an individual back on, we've now improved their home life, improved the life with their spouse, their children, their coworkers. Are they able to go back to work? And that's what it's all about as far as, getting better and providing value. Get back on your feet, figure out how to get better every day. How can I provide value? If you get after it like that, you're figuring out the right way. And that's what we've been able to see with these veterans that we've been helping.
Absolutely. And that's awesome. And I'm going to put all the information in the show notes for this episode. Aside from the treatment, what other types of practices have you implemented in your life that you think have really had a marked improvement on your performance and on your well-being?
Yeah, I think we spoke a little bit about routines, and I have a morning ritual, if you will, where I go through a gratitude journal. So I have 5 things that I'll write down and kind of re-experience things. And going back to talking about some of the things we talked about, I found that when I come from a spirit of gratefulness, of gratitude, there's no time for fear, or there's no time for anger, or there's no time for anxiety. When you're just hanging on what's grateful and getting your mind primed for the day that way, I found that, that helps me to perform at a higher level. I usually like to go right into a meditation practice, and I have a different mindfulness techniques that I implement, but usually I'll spend somewhere between 10 and 15 minutes after my gratitude portion of just meditating and attempting to be mindful. And I spoke on a little bit earlier, and that's just removing myself from the equation, and then just trying to be present in the here in the present moment. And I found doing that, coming back to reality, helps to reground me and repurpose me, and again prime me for optimal success for the day.
Absolutely. I was speaking to Adam Majors he's got an organization called the Warriors Ascent, and his organization, they focus on mindfulness, and they use something called depth psychology, which kind of mixes the psychological and the more mystical elements of the mind together. Mm-hmm. And they do things like yoga and meditation together, and they kind of take people through what they call the warrior's journey. And they're out of Kansas City, Missouri, and they've been having some pretty good success with it. And I think that in a lot of ways, when you are doing things to take care of yourself, like meditation, that can actually shave off the edge of that kind of cortisol dump you're getting every day, and kind of save some of that pregnenolone. You know, we talked last time about the pregnenolone steal.
Yep.
But basically, if you're constantly pumping cortisol out, you're stealing a lot of the pregnenolone that would go into making your positive hormones. And the more I think you're able to implement this type of thing into your life, the more you're going to shave off a lot of those negative stress hormones that can really cause you to have a lot of hormonal deficiencies down the line as well.
Yeah, I agree 100%, man. And I think is like we have what I'd call a dopamine rich culture, whereas, you know, dopamine is going to that's the brain's reward system, right? So like I want something on demand and I want it now, and I don't get it, then, you know, that makes me angry. That's dopamine. And then walking around in that stress state, high cortisol level, be it from a real anxiety or perceived one, and then having, you know, these dopamine flushes, again, that's an unbalanced segment that you don't want. And I've absolutely found that being mindfulness meditation helps that. And one thing it also does is it helps with what's called neuroplasticity. So the rewiring of the brain, you know, the brain is so unique and it can rewire itself, you know, and that's what we're finding out now is that if you continue to rewire your brain, you can stop the aging process effectively. And they did an Alzheimer's study and see what was the lowest percentage of people to get it. And it was academics. And it was all down the line because, you know, high school was a certain rate, college was a certain rate, majors and a master's degree and a doctoral degree. It was always less and less and less chance to get Alzheimer's. And that's because they kept their mind engaged for the majority of their life. And so it's just another way to challenge your mind to keep it engaged, and the benefits of it, man, awesome.
Absolutely. That is definitely something that I've been trying to do in my own life, because once the first thing I did was I tried to hide out in school for a long time. So I went all the way up to PhD in international politics. I don't know what made me think that was going to be something practical, but I could say that it gave me some alternative perspectives. It helped me to appreciate, I guess you could say, appreciate our hippie friends, if a better term, you know.
Sure.
But you know, But at the same time, you know, it does keep my mind sharp. And going into business, I do tend to think about things a little bit differently than other people and things like that. So,
when do you do yours? Do you do yours in the morning or in the afternoon? What do you like?
So I'm a morning person. I'm up every day, as long as it's a good day at 0400.
Yeah.
And I find that the more work I'm able to get done between 04 and 08, the better my day goes, right?
Yeah.
So the first thing I do is I wake up and I sit there for a second and I try to take stock of what's around me. I try to really just kind of be present for a second. Then what I'll do is I'll really focus on my breathing. Like breathe in through my nose, out through my mouth. Really, really focus on it and try and be mindful of it. And then I'll do that for about 20 minutes. And then I'll get up, and then the first thing I do is I drink some water, because the brain needs water as soon as you get up, just to try and start to function, just to try and start to you know, recover from the night's sleep when you're losing a lot of water. And then from there, go to use the bathroom. I'll come back in and I'll pull out my journal. I have a journal right here that I keep with me. And I'll write down everything I'm grateful for. I'll rewrite down my goal, my major goal for the day. And then I'll write down what my plan of the day is and how I'm going to accomplish it. And then similarly, my evenings, and I haven't been doing this as well as I should be lately, but my evenings, I'll do the same thing. I'll talk about what went well during the day, what I'm grateful for from that day, what could have been better. And then I'll talk about my focus for tomorrow. What is my focus going to be for tomorrow? And
I like that. So when would you do that if the schedule, you know, aligned to where you wanted it to be? Like what time of the evening would you do that?
Sleep has never been my best thing. So it's usually around 11:30, but I'd like to get that done by like 9:30 if possible, and get to bed. But
I like that, man.
I found
priming the brain unconsciously or subconsciously, what's going to happen for the next day.
Absolutely. And then I'll put on binaural beats. I don't know if you
know
the tones you listen to while you're sleeping. And those helped me out. And that's where I'm screwing up right now, is because I need to get the binaural beats back in my life, because they actually help to meditate me to sleep. They tend to quiet down some of those thoughts that'll be racking my brain. But that's the biggest thing is the gratitude really helps, because a lot of times, we sit there and we look at everything that is in front of us right now. We look at the road ahead and we think, oh man, well, it's so long until we get there. I'm not getting the sales I want. I'm not earning $1 million a year right now. And what we fail to see is how far we've come.
Yeah.
And we don't focus on that. And, I have to remind myself every day, 3.5 years ago, I was living out of my car.
Yeah.
I've come a long way since then. I've come a long way in a lot of different things since then. And I have to remind myself of that.
Man, in 3.5 years, what you've been able to accomplish is incredible, bro.
Well, dude, thank you so much. And I appreciate that. And, I think the biggest reason is because I had, like we said before, is because I had a purpose behind what we're doing.
Yep.
And my purpose isn't to get rich. You're not going to get rich off of selling T-shirts. But I think that there is a community here that has so much potential.
Yeah.
And that has so much potential, not just to succeed and to achieve, but to have an impact on this country and on this world, and to make this world a better place. And I'm not talking about, make the United States strong again and make it militarily strong again. Yes, we will, but I'm also talking about being creative, building things, making things that make other people's lives better. We have that potential in this community, and I know we can do it.
Yeah. It's about, getting resources that are scarce and making them abundant to all, I think is where we're going, and that's the right thing to do, regardless of a specific line in the sand.
Have you read this book, Abundance?
Oh yeah.
Dude, I'm going through it right now.
Peter Diamandis. Where are you at in it?
I'm where am I here? I'm on page 38. I started reading it the other day while I was at the VA. But the first chapter he's got another book out as well that you want to read after this one. The precursor to that book is awesome as well. Awesome. Yeah, we're talking about the book Abundance by Peter Diamandis and
Stephen Kotler.
Yeah, it's really, really good. And I've just gotten through basically the first couple of chapters, and it's really changing my perspectives on a lot of different things. And I'll put that in the show notes for you guys at home. But really awesome book, and exactly what Andrew just said: taking resources that are scarce and making them abundant, and through that bringing value to this world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think that I listened to somebody say something interesting the other day, and they were like, I can tell you somebody's values simply by looking at what they spend their money on and where they spend their time. Show me what somebody spends their money on, show me where they spend their time, and I'll tell you that man's values. And so I thought, wow, what a great thing to say, and what a way to aspire to live, to think, hey, that it is really easy. I don't just have to talk about it. I can show it, through these actions.
Absolutely. It's empirical.
And I thought that was a great saying.
And that's something to think about for all of you at home. Think about, if you want to think about where you're going and what you're doing, look at what you're spending your money on. Look at how you're spending your time. Look at how you're living your life.
Yeah.
Um,
That's what changed it for us and me and my brother again with starting the foundation and, and making it about other people. But when you start looking at it like, hey, how can we start solving problems that are out there that affect a large number of people? One, man, that's just a great and very fulfilling thing to do. But two, as an entrepreneur, if you guys are, think about all the business opportunities that you can find out there to do two things: make and earn a capture value and provide value. Man, that's incredible. That's what the world needs, is people who can, provide and capture value, because if you can capture that value, then you can put it into somebody else who can, expand on that.
Absolutely. And what you're finding now in this age of social media and this communications age is that people understand value a little bit more these days, and they understand when you're providing value, and they understand a little bit better now about when you're not. Mm-hmm. And you're going to find that people who do good in this world are going to get ahead. You're going to find that people who do provide excellent value to others are going to get ahead. And that's exactly why I think the veteran community is so primed to do well here.
Yeah,
because we understand service, we understand value, we understand freedom, and we understand being grateful for freedom.
Man, I agree. And one takeaway from spending a month out in Silicon Valley was that leadership ability and capabilities are still in high demand. That is something that will never go out of style. Mm-hmm. So we have plenty of specialization, right? We have incredible engineers that are at our disposal. But what is in a short supply is in people who not manage, lead, can clearly communicate intent, and then empower everybody with the tools they need to move as a group from point A to point B. That is a transferable skill. So as a veteran, think about that. Think how you can apply those things. We don't need you necessarily to know the specifics on, how to turn nuts and bolts on a spaceship. But can you manage that team to get them to be able to do it on a timeline under budget and come up with new and innovative ways to do it? I think that you can. That's what we provide, and it is in high demand.
100%. And you just came out of an entrepreneurial program yourself, right?
Yeah, as a Stanford Ignite graduate school of business out there, and they run a 4-week program every year for veterans, specifically post 9/11 veterans, being able to come up with the idea, take it through the design process, and to actually how to come up with a business model, business strategy, go-to-market strategy, and then actually come up with a prototype and pitch venture capitalist investors from the Silicon Valley, or get feedback from them on your project. So it was a great opportunity to learn some more insights into the business world. That's what I really wanted to go to it, is just try to better what we're doing with the foundation, and then try to, see what the Stanford network was all about. It was pretty impressive, Chris.
That's awesome. And people can apply for that online too, you think, right?
Yeah, absolutely. You can type in Stanford Ignite, and that will come up next. So they run it mid-June. It starts in mid-June. It's in mid-July. So they'll start taking applicants for next year, probably next quarter. So I would check it out on the Stanford Ignite website. I highly recommend it. It's a great opportunity. It costs $2,000 to the end user, but that's a highly subsidized program by the alumni there. It costs a lot more than that. And that's going to cover housing and 2 meals a day. And so, most of the incidentals are going to be covered for. So it is a great investment if anybody's wanting to learn more about the design making process, the entrepreneurial process, or just get plugged in with Stanford and Silicon Valley. It's a highly competitive course that you're going to have to try out to get, but all the more reason to go after it.
Oh, wow. That's amazing. One other question I wanted to ask you too was in regards to your practices, what are your workouts like now? And do they differ from when you were just getting into the teams and things like that?
Yeah, totally different in the fact that I don't do the amount of cardio that I do anymore. It's funny, man. I was incredibly fit my entire time. I mean, professional athlete level fit, but I don't think I really learned about really proper nutrition since being on the wrong side of health, and not just drinking, Diet Cokes or Coke Zeros anymore, and thinking, hey, I'm not ingesting calories or stuff like that. I'm a lot more clean, how I do things now. Very functional on the teams, and everybody kind of has things that they're into, but you have to be good at everything at a minimum. You have to have endurance, you have to have power, you have to have strength, you have to have explosive power. You have to have all that. What I do now is just things that I like or things that I think are weak points. And so I'm going through this body weight gymnastics course right now, and doing a 6-week progression there because I never spent a lot of time on body weight. So just getting to know the body a little bit different that way. Normally what I like to do is heavy, right? Heavy Olympic lifts, cleans, jerks, squats. I don't know, it's what I'm good at. And I started lifting at a young age, and throwing around heavy weight just makes me feel good, like I've accomplished something. Setting up a task, a goal, and going after it. And that's what I like to do. But you got to get out there and challenge yourself to also do new things and get out of your comfort zone. So, that's what I'm doing right now with gymnastic body weight workout.
Awesome. And are you pursuing any other sports besides the throwing?
No. Well, I will be mountain biking next month. I'm doing a 3-day deal that does 100 miles in 3 days, and so that's another good experience. Like our example, I don't have a lot of experience in mountain biking, so I'm starting training Monday to train up for this ride we're doing here in a couple months.
That's pretty cool. What kind of terrain are you going to be going through?
It's going to be it's all off-road. It's out in Texas, so Crawford, Texas is central Texas, so not too difficult terrain. I don't think there's any too big drops or anything like that. It's just forest type stuff.
Very cool. Very cool. Any other kind of tips you want to give? If you could give, if there's a young kid out there right now who's, not necessarily even a veteran, but somebody who's trying to figure out their place in life, right? What would you tell them?
Well, I would go back to the advice I gave that my dad gave me, and I'll say it again. If you can find a way to make it about somebody else, put value into somebody else, that's going to put value into you. But I think you need to build on that before you can get there. And if you can just focus on, hey, what are things in life that I'm passionate about? But have a purpose to it, have a why. So be able to figure out what you love to do and know why it is that you love to do it. And if that's really the case, then tie that into benefiting somebody else and then pursue it to the best of your abilities. Contribute and perform to the absolute best of your abilities. You won't reach perfection, but you can always improve. You know what I mean? And if you go after life that way with, hey, I'm going to control my attitude, I'm going to control my effort, and I'm going to put out the top performance in those areas, you're going to be successful, because success is a byproduct of just being able to do your best at all times and in every case, and for anybody who also needs you to perform. And realize that you have to earn it. You have to earn it. Whatever it is you want to do in life, it comes with a price tag. And if it doesn't, it's probably not worth having. You know what I mean? So winning the lottery might be cool for somebody, but I would never want to do that, because I just want something that I would be able to earn and say, I made a plan, I went out and I persevered and we overcame and we earned it. That makes life worth living, being able to earn it. And the beautiful thing about America is you have the right to go out and earn whatever you want if you want to try hard enough and work hard enough.
Absolutely. Andrew, those are extremely wise words. And I hope that everyone out there listen to that and applies that. Because as I said before, I believe that our community, the veteran community, has so much opportunity and so much ability to have a positive impact on this country. And that means that so many people out there, who are maybe discouraged with the way the world is right now, maybe thinking about the world in terms of a very dark place. You know, we can change this. We can change our, if not the world, if we can't change the world, we can change our perception of the world. And rather than worrying about things and complaining about things, actually getting up and going out there and doing things, going out there and taking action, going out there and making our dreams come true and giving value to others. And the first thing that has to happen is that people need to know how they're going to be taking care of themselves, how to take care of your brain, how to heal yourself after your service in a way that's going to allow you to do these things. And I just really want to acknowledge you, because I think it's an amazing thing that you're doing. You're giving so many people the keys that they need to figure these things out for themselves. You're giving so many people the impetus to live a better life, to go out there and to take a chance on themselves, to not sit there and resign themselves to a fate of wondering what could have been or thinking about the past, but focusing on the present and focusing on their current choices and what they're going to do now. So Andrew, thank you so much for coming on this show, and thank you so much for the work that you're doing.
Yeah, Chris, thank you, brother, for having us on, and look forward to having a good and long-lasting relationship between the two of us, man.
Absolutely, brother. I look forward to that too, man. And I will put all of your information for Warrior Angels Foundation on the show notes. Are you on Twitter or Instagram?
Yeah, we're on Twitter at WAFTBI. And I think the same thing for Facebook. But on our website, we have the icons there for all of our social media, which I know we have Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and what's the other hot one? Instagram.
Yeah, awesome. So, dude, thank you so much. And to everyone at home, I hope whatever you're doing, wherever you are, you're enjoying and loving life and following your path to where you want to be. I'll talk to you all soon.